am fucksteak Stephanie Sterling here, one of the few people on this areola-forsaken platform unafraid to use words like fuck, or bugger, or areola, or gun. Yeah, people can't say gun anymore because they'll get demonetized. God, I love having nothing left to lose. Speaking of which, last week we talked about how AI was stealing my content, and I discussed what it's like to be a writer in this environment. I mentioned there were some unannounced projects I was on, and one of those projects got announced in the time between then and now. It's called Date Everything. It's a dating sim in which you can date everything. I am a writer for the game, one of the writers. Very excited not just because it is, in my opinion, a fun experience, but it has allowed me to get the bravery to come out here and say that I am in love with a tin of hot dogs. We're very happy. Another thing we discussed last week was the societal uselessness of the investor class. Investors and executives are more or less worthless. They take most of the money out of our society, and then they'll blame poor people for doing it. We are going to discuss this week about just how useless they are because, as usual, I make a point and the game industry proves it. So, let's talk about a particularly telling question that Capcom was asked by a knobhead. I used to think that video games were hard work. I used to think they took a long time to make. I used to think the average game developer put a ton of effort into their games, unless they were an asset flip. Historically, the time between a video game's initial pitch and its final launch state has been measured in years, with even moderately sized productions still requiring a considerable amount of both time and resources. The more involved I've gotten with the game dev side of things, the more I've seen just how bloody long stuff takes. But then again, what do I know? See, it turns out that everything we thought we knew about video game development is wrong. Our assumptions that games take any amount of time to make were just that, assumptions.
And everyone knows when you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and umption.
Quite what video game developers are doing with all the time between pitch and launch, who the fuck knows? They're clearly wasting it though, because according to an experienced and knowledgeable source, video games can actually be finished and released at literally any moment. What's the difference between a game taking years to make and a game taking weeks to make? Absolutely none, according to recent revelations from a total expert. Okay, that's enough of that bullshit. I'm too bloody annoyed to maintain a sarcastic tone today. The snidey opener for today's topic is referencing recent exchanges between Capcom and investors in which the latter showed themselves up for the pigshit thick, out-of-touch, bratty little fuckheads they are. The questions these brain trusts ask are so chair-shaggingly ignorant as to not only betray a complete lack of qualification for running a game's business, but a potential lack of having worked a single day in their Christ-damned lives. See, according to shareholders who routinely think they're smart based on no other evidence than the fact they happen to have a lot of money, video games can just, come out whenever we want them to, or more specifically, whenever the shareholders want them to. Who said a huge game like Monster Hunter takes a long time to make? Just put it out sooner, because it'll make more money that way. That's how videos game works, right? If you think I'm exaggerating the extremity of the stupidity on display, you haven't seen what was said yet, because trust me, no amount of sarcasm, no amount of plain description could do it justice. So I'll just have at it. Here is the question some dumbass spunkwit seriously asked the publisher. Wouldn't you be able to capture more profit by bumping up the release date of the next Monster title, currently scheduled for 2025, to the December 2024 holiday season? Also, would it not be possible to make moon cheese if the moon was full of milk? I might have added the bit about the milk. As for the rest of it, holy fuck. Holy fuck, gang? What in the name of skeleton hell would possess someone to say something so obviously wrong, so embarrassingly uninformed, and so infantile? That's the best word for it. Infantile. It's a level of naivety that you literally couldn't have if you knew even a tiny percentage of what the fuck you're talking about. And I'm not even talking about just the game's business. You shouldn't be asking that question about anything that takes any amount of time to do. Not if you know the slightest bit about, well, anything. I'm not one to praise game publisher executives, since most of them are as ignorant as the investors, but honestly, whoever from Capcom answered that unintentional joke of a question without insulting the Inquisitor must have titanium restraints in their mouth. Not that they answered with anything but patronizing fluff. We plan to announce the release timing for the next Monster Hunter once preparations are complete. We hope you are looking forward to it. We remain committed to achieving our goal of 10% or better operating profit growth each fiscal year. That last part is telling, as it's a nice reminder of something I've often criticized, the fantastical myth that a business can keep growing forever, that there will never be a cap on the amount of profit you can make, and if you're making a ton of money, but it's the same amount of money you made last year, it doesn't matter how good that is, it's time to panic and have the shares drop. Money is unlimited forever. The laws of physics be fucking damned. With that in mind, it's almost unsurprising that investors really are so stupid they think you can just bump up a release date of a massive big budget video game on a whim, going from mid-development to completely finished in just a couple of months. They already think companies just grow forever, despite the inevitable logistical impossibility of such a fancy. It's a belief that does direct harm to the industry, as publishers desperately slash budgets and lay off thousands of employees a year to squeeze every last bit of extra profit they can and satisfy the baby-brained goobers who demand it. Even with that in mind, I'm still shocked and horrified that an adult human would ask something so embarrassing. Like, of bleeding course you can't just magic up a finished game whenever you want, in the same way you can't just put bread in your mouth and expect to be eating toast. How do you not know that it takes time to make stuff? How do you go through life thinking you can just arbitrarily decide when huge media projects are ready for release? This is what being so wealthy you don't have to work for anything does to your perception of the world. This is what compulsive entitlement does to your attitude. Shareholders are so poisoned by their own greed that they truly don't factor reality into their demands for immediate profit. Most people have pointed and laughed at this investor showing their ass and sounding like a complete boob, and that's not a particularly wrong response, but it isn't mine. No, this question, this pathetic question, makes me angry. It quite genuinely offends me. Not only does it diminish and ignore the amount of work that goes into making a ridiculously big game like Monster Hunter, it encapsulates an attitude that is wrecking the game industry. As I mentioned earlier, the magical beliefs of shareholding fantasists cause genuine harm, and this idea that you can simply bump up a release date is absolutely fucking disastrous. This is the exact attitude that leads to crunch, which by the way is abuse. Coercing developers into staying obscenely late and taking so few breaks their bodies literally start breaking down themselves is wretchedly abusive and has been normalized in service to nothing more noble than pleasing impatient shareholders who want their money immediately. Need I remind you that unrealistic deadlines on games like Anthem led to BioWare devs becoming what's known as stress casualties, traumatizing themselves by working beyond reasonable human capacity? The history of the game industry is rife with stories of studios overworking to make harshly tight deadlines for the financial benefit of a wealthy group of people who put absolutely zero effort of their own into the media they're extremely profiting from. While that one question asked of Capcom is funny in its pure irrationality, the wanton disconnect from common sense is the norm with these people. The question isn't a joke. It's how these people think, as evidenced by the overwhelming frequency with which developers crunch to try and meet deadlines they physically cannot meet. We need to appreciate exactly how unqualified the people controlling the game industry are. They shouldn't be the ones deciding deadlines and targets at all when they don't know the first thing about actually meeting them. This is why games get rushed. This is why games get released in an unfinished state. This is why so many live service games launch with a pittance of content and offer roadmaps of updates that might not ever materialise because the developers have to spend all their time fixing bugs and ironing out balance issues for their busted-ass games instead of making the stuff they promised to make. That's an investor, someone with a huge amount of influence over the industry, someone who publishers slavishly exist to satisfy, is casually suggesting a game can be hurried out before Christmas like it's easy, is absolutely horrifying in its normalcy. There are people whose opinions on game development are less than worthless, yet their opinion is treated like it matters the most. Capcom should have called them a fucking twat. But they can't. Obviously, nice as it'd be. Last month, it was reported that 59% of professionals polled by the Game Developer Collective believe the game industry is in a bad way, and you'll never guess who they blame. Well, you will guess it since it's literally the subject of this video. Of the 59% who say the business is doing badly, 61% literally blamed unreasonable investor expectations. What's funny is I didn't know about this poll until after I said the same thing in the script, like I only just saw it a few minutes ago. Nice to know we're in agreement. But you tend to get agreed with a lot when you're objectively correct.
The best kind of correct.
But yeah, a significant number of developers think investors' demands are a root cause of problems in the game's market, and that's because they are. It's also worth noting that the second most common reason, of 58%, is mismanagement. This is another thing I've criticised for years: corporate leadership, barely more informed than the investors, the ones who agree to the unreasonable demands, encourage crunch, make decisions that upend development, and then indulge in devastating layoffs when the time comes to perpetuate the fantasy of perpetual growth. The foolishness doesn't stop there, by the way. In that same call, Capcom was asked if the new Monster Hunter could come to consoles such as the Switch despite its scale outpacing the portable system's capabilities. Will this game be limited to these non-portable consoles? Asked a tool who phrased their query in such a way I'm not convinced they even know the names of the game and consoles they're referencing. And again, this is all just the greed talking. They know nothing about the games being made. They know nothing about the systems they're made for. All they know is they want a game on as many systems as possible, and they want it to happen instantaneously. They want all the reward with none of the time and cost of getting it. I'm not one known for Simpsons quotes, but the way investors talk reminds me of one of my favourites. They want all their groceries in one bag, but they don't want the bag to be heavy. God, it's depressing. Yeah, I'm about done. I've seethed about all I can seethe. To reiterate it though, as it cannot be emphasised enough, absurd as the release date question was, it is not an outlier in its absurdity. This is simply the way all investors think, distilled into a comment that perfectly demonstrates it but does not exaggerate it. And these are the thorough bellends who get to call the shots. Terrifying. Thank God for me, by the way.